Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today, and thanks for all the positive well wishes, and positive feedback I got from everybody. It's easy to forget sometimes, locked up in this office, how many friends I have out there. So that felt good. What you're seeing on your screen here was from the official launch of the program that I'm participating in. They did a week-long intensive to kick off and help us get to know each other, and also to kind of get into the swing of being back in school. The average age of this cohort is, I think, 39, and many people haven't been in school for 15 years or more. So it's dual purpose, kind of get us back into the swing of being students, and also to create a lot of space for us to get to know each other and bond with each other. One of the things they did that was also pretty nice, they had a special session for the spouses. So Shannon was able to come for the first 24 hours, and then they kind of kick them out. They don't want them there distracting us. But they had a special session for her where she was able to hear from some of the students that are part of last year's and the year before's class. And then also they even had a little case that they prepared. So they had a little class for them, which was kind of cool. Although I have to say, I think they oversold it a little bit. One of the guys in the class before us has just moved to a new job, and he tripled his salary in the first year. He's not even done with the program yet. And so, of course, Shannon heard that, and now she's counting on that. And then the professor told the group that they were going to make better listeners out of all of us. So Shannon's excited. She thinks I'm going to triple my salary in a year and become a better listener. So we'll see. Like I said, I think they oversold it. Just a few things before we get into some of my kind of takeaways here. The big thing, the faculty was top notch. The curriculum was outstanding. Of course, USC is one of the finest schools in the world, and this program is top notch. But the thing that really stood out is the group of people that you see. So there's 68 people plus me. And as I mentioned, about 39 is the average age. People have, I think, average 13, 14 years of experience. And in general, these are all kind of middle managers, directors, maybe vice presidents, but all different kinds of backgrounds. So we have everything from a Navy SEAL. We have a professional ballroom, international champion ballroom dancer, filmmakers, runs the whole gamut. We've got people that were born in 20 different countries. So it's really inspiring to kind of hear everyone's story. Nobody's quite alike. And it was really humbling to be included in such a special group of people. So the other thing I wanted to share before we get into my takeaways is the reason I'm doing this. So as part of the discussions, they brought up this kind of traditional learning pyramid model. And this is kind of common sense that the best way to learn something is to either A, put it into practice, or B, even better than that, is actually trying to teach it to other people. And so that's why I thought it would be good to do this for my own benefit. But of course, that's not the only reason. I hope that it will be beneficial to those that are watching, and you can get some benefit from this program that I'm participating in. Of course, I won't be sharing, how to do accounting and finance and things like that, but just some kind of the high level takeaways. So to get started, I have two big takeaways from this first session. The first has to do with strategy and its ability to have a multiplier effect. So there's a famous story, you've probably heard it before, of a horse and rider that are racing down the road, and they seem to be in a hurry, really, must be going somewhere important. They've really kind of shown determination, and a bystander calls out to the guy on the horse and says, "Where are you going?" And he says, "I don't know, ask the horse." And so it's a good lesson in that, it's especially in business and work, it's very easy to just jump into stuff and try to get down to business. And we did a exercise that really highlighted this. So the setup is the first part of the exercise is a trap. So they put you in a group. I think we had 3 or 4 people in our group, and they give you 1 minute or 2 minutes to perform a task. The task doesn't really matter. It has to do with finding things that the entire group has in common. And so you try to write down as many things as you have in common. And it's stressful because you only have 2 minutes. So of course, and you got people don't really know each other, so you're just kind of just jumping into it. And most groups were able to list about 10 things, and one group only had 3. So the professor, of course, is having a fun time with this, and he's making fun of us and saying that his teenage daughter and her group could easily list 70 or more things, and he had a lot of fun kind of poking at us. And then we spent some time as a class discussing possible strategies of ways that you might increase your performance. So that would be choosing categories of things that people are likely to have in common, body parts. Have you, rather than do you like certain foods, have you ever tried certain foods, kind of on and on. Streamlining the communication, avoiding the bottlenecks of the person that's writing, the size of the handwriting because it's got to fit in the paperwork, and so on. So next they gave us 1 minute to sit with our group and plan, come up with a plan for, okay, how are we going to do this? And we know we're going to have 2 minutes. We're going to try again. So once we sat for a minute and strategized, came up with a plan, my group was able to do over 200 where we had only done 10 before. So it was literally over a 20 times increase in our performance. And a lot of groups had very similar results. There was actually a group that did even better than us. And it was pretty much just transformation across everybody. And so it really is kind of a silly exercise, but it was really an eye-opener about the difference between tactics and strategy. So if you just change your tactics and do things a little bit faster or better, you might get an increase of 10 or 20%. But by looking at the strategy and really having a plan, that can yield 100 or 200%. So really good lesson, obviously kind of common sense. But as I walked away from the course, I couldn't help but think of all the times in my life and my day here, even today, where it's just, you're just trying to get things done and you're just jumping into stuff without really stopping to think of, okay, is this the best way to do it? Could I be multiplying my performance here in some way? So I'll conclude this topic takeaway with a folksy take from one of my heroes, Abe Lincoln. You may have heard this, but I think it kind of helps wrap it up. He says, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening my axe. Yeah, so really good wisdom from Honest Abe. So the next big takeaway has to do with teamwork, and specifically working with us in a small group. Of course, most of the work in the world gets done in a small group. If you're in a Pedigo store, you have a small group of probably less than half a dozen people that are working in your company. But there's lots of other cases in a family. Just lots of things involve a small group. And so this is a new area for me, somewhere I'm hoping to really expand and learn a lot. And there's a big difference between being in a group of peers and being in a group where you say, okay, you do this, you do that, I'll do this. It's a little more challenging when you're in that kind of setting, especially when you don't know the people and you've got to kind of do this group formation fast and kind of in a pressure cooker. So the grand finale of our week was a group project. So they randomly put people in a group of 6 or 7 people, and you have less than 24 hours to analyze a business case and prepare a presentation with specific recommendations. It doesn't really matter, but for us, the case was we looked at Apple and we were to pretend that Tim Cook was coming to our class and he was going to sit there and hear a presentation for us. And the final product was to be 8 minutes, supposed to be a kind of polished professional thing, as if you're giving this to Tim Cook. So that's the setup. The primary purpose, it was obvious right away, reading between the lines, is that obviously Tim Cook isn't coming to the class. So the purpose is not the recommendations or how well we understand Apple. The purpose was to practice coming together and working as a group. And we were advised to invest time building the relationship and developing this group charter, which is something we had kind of worked with a little bit before turning our attention to the actual assignment. So before we got started, I shared a story with the group that I'll kind of recount for you here that I think is really touching. I think my dad will watch this at some point. It's something we've shared in the past. So in the story, there's a father that is baking a cake with his son for a Cub Scout auction. And the rule is no moms are allowed. So it's got to be a dad-son thing. And so in the story, the guy goes into great length about how bad they do. It's the wife is just kind of sitting there laughing at them. It's, you know, the thing's sloping to one side. It has kind of blotches on it. You kind of get the point. It's really bad, their cake. But, you know, whatever. They put some last minute touches on it, and they head off to the auction. And they get there. I've got a visual aid for this. They get there and they're shocked to see a table of just beautiful culinary masterpieces. So safe to assume that there was some cheating, maybe some moms got involved and helped out. There's just beautifully decorated cakes, goes into great detail, all the difference. There's a TP, there's one that's a scout emblem, one shaped like the United States. They're just beautiful. And they're on these ornate dishes. They're, you know, really displayed prominently. And theirs is on a paper plate with aluminum foil on top of it. So instantly the dad is just totally ashamed and humiliated, and they're running a little late. So he gives the son's name is Mike, gives him all the cash he had in his pocket. I think it was $12, let's say, and told him bid low, bid low. It's an auction. Of course, they're raising money. So and as the auction begins, the dad's just sitting there, he's just dying inside, and he's hearing people talking, you know, kind of whispering about they're calling it the leprosy cake because it has blotches, and he's just they're pointing, and just really embarrassing. And the first cake comes up, and it's all its decorations and fillings were described in detail. The auctioneer says, since this cake is so great, I think it should go for a high price. The bidding starts at $1.50. It ends up selling for $2. Great. Next cake comes up, it sells for $1.50. It's equally beautiful. And all the while, the dad just has this sinking feeling as he imagines what's going to happen when they bring his leprosy cake up. And he just keeps wishing that the kid will just bid on any cake, just anyone, and just let's get out of here. And he wishes he could save his son from this humiliation that's sure to come. And finally, they get to their cake. The auctioneer lifts it up, and the paper plate is sagging in his hands. And before the auctioneer could say a word, the little boy jumps up and shouts at the top of his lungs, $12. And there's silence. You know, nobody, I don't know, you can understand what's going on. There's no counter bid. The kid strides up to the front of the room proudly, and along the way, he's telling all his friends, that's my cake. That's me and my dad made that cake. And he's so proud of it. And when he later, the dad asked him, well, why did you bid all your money all at once? And he said, you know, I didn't want anybody to get our cake. And so it's a really touching story. Of course, when I told it, you know, it's hard not to kind of get a little emotional about it because it's just such a sweet story and a good lesson. And so I thought that would be a good way to set the stage for our work together as a group. And despite that, and despite the fact that we had been told that we really needed to focus before we got into the Apple stuff, we really need to focus on building the group. Right away, when we got to the room, there were members of the group that were just, they want to jump into the work. And it's understandable because by definition, they're putting us in this kind of pressure cooker environment where there's no way we can do an adequate job of this in the time that we have. So it's understandable. And I talked to other groups that kind of fell into this trap, similar to what we were talking about in the first section, just jumping into it. And they paid the price where they would have frustrations and conflicts later that they had to deal with, and it could be stressful. So our group decided really to pull back the reins, and as we were instructed, kind of work on the group itself. And I think it was the right decision. It really paid off for us. But I do, before I describe kind of some of the ways that worked out, I wanted to also say that it was important to have those members of the group that were pushing to get things done too, because as important as it was for us to kind of focus on the group and do the kind of planning strategy part of it, at some point we had to kind of get down to business and get it done. And if there weren't those people that were like, okay, we've done enough planning, let's get down to it, we probably would have been there all night. So it's kind of, there's another case that comes up where you kind of need to have both. You know, you want to have the right strategy, but you got to have the tactics, and you got to get down to business at some point. So a big takeaway for me is that both perspectives were valuable, and ideally you really want to balance where you don't have a group that's run totally by, you know, people focused on the group or totally by people focused on the work. So that was an important takeaway. So I'll share a little bit now about small groups. As I mentioned, this is where a lot of the work of the world gets done. I did go into this with a little bit of knowledge. I took a group discussion class many years ago during my undergraduate studies that were cut short. And I just actually recently come upon a thing that I'll read here for you. And so the traditional model for the way that a small group operates and comes together is very predictable what happens. So there's a forming stage, and then there's a storming stage, then there's norming stage, and then performing. So there's lots of different variations of this, but pretty much this is what happens. If you've ever been in a small group, you can probably relate to that. I'm going to read this little bit that I kind of went into this with the knowledge of it. So it's saying that this is a developmental model in the sense that each stage must be completed before the group can move to the next. So that's kind of important. So in the first stage, forming, team members assemble prior to beginning their work as a team and nominally engage their task while taking the measure of one another. In the second stage, storming, team members argue, debate, posture, preen, and otherwise compete for status and social support. During this stage, little work is actually accomplished. The third stage, norming, begins once the team members have established their informal pecking order and alliances. In the third stage, the group decides on its operational procedures, who will do what and when, how to know if something has been done correctly, how to determine if a person is performing appropriately, and so on. The final stage, performing, concerns actually doing the work of the team. It is only after the group has finished storming and norming that it can truly begin functioning as a team. So under normal circumstances, you may have days, weeks, months, maybe even years to kind of go through this process. And maybe it's not always linear. You might jump back and forth. We had a few hours to get through it. So it's kind of by design. It's a little bit of a pressure cooker, a microcosm to help us develop these skills. So the forming part was easy. We had lunch first, and we kind of told each other, we went around the room and kind of told brief versions of our story. I should mention here, it was really touching to hear some of the stories. We had somebody from Angola, somebody from India, somebody from China, somebody from Burma. Some of you know I'm involved in Rotary. So our big thing in Rotary is we want to try to eradicate polio. There was a woman in our group that had polio when she was a little girl, and so she could walk, but with great difficulty. And she actually went on to become a medical doctor and quite successful, and just had a story about how she really had to fight like hell to do that. And it was like, you could have cried hearing the story. So that was good. We kind of formed over lunch and telling our stories. The next thing, as far as the storming and the norming, we combine those two by going through this process of developing a team charter. So this was kind of suggested. We've gone through kind of a similar exercise in different groups. And so this was the charter that our group came up with. And I'll kind of run through this a little bit. So the purpose of our group was that we wanted to have a final product that was excellent, had the excellence that would be expected in this kind of program, something that everyone was proud of. We wanted the team to be well researched and well briefed. If we're going to be presenting, we're pretending we're pitching to Tim Cook, so we want to be prepared for questions. We wanted the presentation to be visual, tell a story. And then in honor of my story, they said it's not only about the cake. So we kind of established that we were really interested in making the group itself a priority. So some of the specific behaviors that we had is we wanted to be respectful, accommodate different viewpoints. And this is going to be important later. There was this idea of equal airtime. Now, in one of the lectures, it was told, and kind of rings true, is that groups where people speak more or less in the same proportion tend to perform better, where people are contributing equally. And so we put that forward as one of our ideals. One of the things I think was really important is we went into, what are we going to do if there's conflict, if we disagree on something? So we decided we were going to be a democracy and we would vote. We even had a system, we didn't have to use it, where if it was really controversial, we didn't know what we were getting into. We didn't have really controversy, but we said you can ask for a secret vote if you want. And then the other part of that was important was we said that if you're outvoted, you don't get to be sour grapes about it. You've got to go along with the group. You don't get to kind of complain. You got to wholeheartedly go with the decision of the group. We wanted everyone to engage and participate, and we wanted to have fun. So we told jokes. We made time to kind of walk around and kind of enjoy the experience. And so that was fun. And, it says take breaks. So that was our charter. And when it came time to the actual performance, so we formed, we stormed, we normed, and The performance part, I think we really performed beautifully as a team. Once we nailed down the charter, then we also kind of planned out the work as far as how much time we were going to spend on each part of it, who was going to be responsible for what, and so on. Everything really came together really smoothly. There was very little stress. Conflict was virtually non-existent. We did have to vote on one thing, and it was great actually, because we kind of came to a head where we couldn't move forward and decision needed to be made. So we just took a quick vote and we were able to move forward. So I think it really paid off to invest that time earlier. And talking to some of the other groups that didn't invest as much, even though their presentation, despite their final product, it was a lot more messy. And so we kind of avoided that. And overall, I was surprised by how quickly we were able to really come together and gel as a group. And so actually when we did our presentation itself, we definitely lived up to the stated purpose of a final product that everyone was proud of. We all felt really good about what we did. We worked hard on it. We even had the ballroom dancing champion I was talking about earlier. I should have mentioned I missed a country. We had a Russian. She was from Russia, and she was amazing. She was very dedicated and hardworking, and she got up in the early morning before everyone else, left the hotel we were at, and went to FedEx and had handouts, the slides, and a bunch of research printed out and bound, spiral bound, to give to Tim Cook. And so we really felt good about what we did. The content of our actual recommendations were really, rock solid, I think, and the delivery in particular was on point. So that's kind of the most important for me personally. The thing that was maybe the most memorable about it is when we were actually up there giving the presentation, I really felt connected to the rest of the group in a way that was kind of surprising to me. And especially we had English second language people, and I know from learning Chinese myself and dealing with my wife Shannon how challenging it can be to present in another language. And so some of these group members really worked hard, and it was a big deal for them to get up there and really give this talk, and they just nailed it. And I just felt so proud of them and proud of the group, and it was really a special experience for me. And I was proud of the cake we made, I can say. And the thing that was really amazing in hindsight is the day before that we were complete strangers. We didn't, we maybe had talked briefly, but we didn't know each other. So our performance was judged by a panel, and there is another big takeaway here. We were rated. There were really three things. I didn't see the exact criteria, but we were rated very high on group chemistry. So it was obvious that when you compare, we saw other groups give, and they didn't gel as much as we did. And also our presentation was really polished and smooth, and it was something, that was great. So we rated really high on that. We lost points because one of the things that they wanted was to be focused on one specific area of recommendations. And we decided to kind of go broad and have 4 different areas of recommendations that we made. And even though we did have them well researched and documented, we didn't really, in the presentation, it's only 8 minutes, so we didn't dive deep into them. And that's what they were looking for. In hindsight, it should have been obvious. And so this is where the lesson comes in, is there was a point during the evening where one of the group members felt very strongly, shared this later, that we should be focusing on one thing, not spreading it out across 4. And she did speak up about it. But as soon as she got any resistance from me and another group member, she just backed down. And, okay, I just want to get along. Let's kind of get, not a big deal. And so this is kind of, we lived up to our charter pretty good. The equal airtime thing was very difficult because we knew it was important because there were members of our group that were quieter than others, maybe not as forceful. And so for that same reason, it was very difficult to do. And I was probably the #1 offender of, taking up more than my fair share of airtime. So the really important takeaway is that in a group, it's everyone's responsibility to, at sometimes, take a step back and let other people be heard. And at other times, to really speak up and be willing to fight for your ideas. And the tension between those two isn't always obvious. Now, for some people, it's pretty obvious you need to chill and other people need to step up more, but it's not always easy. It's kind of a balancing act that's not always easy. So it was a real takeaway. And beyond just the kind of being heard, it's kind of the idea of when to lead and when to follow. And so that was a really important takeaway for me. That's the end of my notes. I hope that was useful to everybody. It sure was fun for me to kind of recount it. It definitely kind of helped me crystallize a lot of the ideas by kind of pulling all this out and trying to put the thoughts together. So I can take a few questions if anybody. I guess I'll stop the recording, and if there's any questions, you're welcome to type them into the chat.